So this morning's talk is going to be an entirely different flavor. Really interested in sharing what we've been doing to address all sorts of issues that have been in the press in the United States and in other places, in and around things like the Me Too movement, transgender identity, sexual abuse within national federations engaged with sports. And so it wasn't difficult to find headlines of thank you, that address these things that have forced us to take action, to protect people within the Federation, to protect the Federation itself. And this is a set of policies that together, I think more than anything, help us start a conversation about issues that may be difficult to talk about. So I would like to sort of spin through what I have to share here, and then if time permits, have a conversation, because I think this, more than anything, is an educational opportunity. So our approach to putting forth some new policies, first and foremost, was one of organizational compliance with things like federal, state, and local laws. We have a core principle, a core value of inclusion, and yesterday I talked about how there was a lot of disparity in our membership between males and females. That certainly was a driver for us in adopting these policies. We wanted things that were easy to implement for our members, and we wanted, more than anything else, to have a respectful conversation. When we launched new policies, any time you do this, you just never know what you're going to step into. And we certainly stepped in it in some people's minds, but again, we feel like we're doing the right thing for the needs of our community. We've been very open to feedback and input about our policies and have made some adjustments along the way. And we've taken a very non-activist stance. That was really important, that these were being done for all the right reasons. So what I'd like to talk about are our background check policy, our transgender policy, and our safe play guidelines. It might be surprising for people in the room to know that last year we started doing background checks, not 15 years ago, not 20 years ago, last year. And there wasn't a specific incident at the time that led us to this point, but it just felt like it was time. And when I came on board in October of 2017, I was surprised to learn that the organization didn't have a screening process for people who worked with children at our events. And so all US Chess employees, regular staff that is, people who work at tournaments as contractors, and even the small number of volunteers that we continue to use in things like the Girls Club room are required to have a background investigation once every 3 years. And in order to do a background check in the United States, you have to get paperwork from the person who's being investigated, signatures, there's a set of paperwork, and we handle that information very carefully because it requires that you provide a lot of personal information. So only our Director of Administration handles that paperwork. Sometimes it's directly sent to our Director of Events, but those are the only two people who ever receive that information. And when the report is issued, the physical report is only available to those people, and a determination is made based on what comes back, whether a person is eligible to work at one of our events. And to my knowledge, nobody to date has been turned away. I suspect if there is somebody who has a history that might prevent them from working at an event, they may not apply to have a background check in the first place. So there may be some self-selection going on there. The U.S. Chess Office, as I said, collects the information, and we actually pay for the cost of the background investigation. And in the future, we hope to make this a list of cleared tournament staff available to our organizers of national events that are bid out, so that we're not passing on a mandate or a cost to our members that we're already actually paying for at the national level. It doesn't make sense to duplicate that cost. So pretty straightforward. We were largely playing catch up with this policy. So the next policy we adopted, we started having conversations early in my tenure. My predecessor had tried to move this issue to the board's attention, and the board was not ready to act. So we in the U.S., as in other places, have been seeing an evolving landscape, both in the social space and in the legal space, about transgender rights. And I think that we came to a point that it just felt like the time was right for U.S. chess to act. And there was this acknowledgement that transgender chess players always existed, and they were already playing at our events. This was nothing new. What was new is that there were perhaps legal protections afforded to them that were not reflected in our own policies. So we knew that we wanted to change that. The changing legal landscape has not improved in the 2 years that I've been on board. And there's a lot of tension between federal, state, and even local laws in this space, and court cases haven't really clarified anything. So we're very much in this evolving set of standards, if you will, or legal guidance that has made navigating this, quite frankly, pretty difficult. So you add to the changing legal norms, changing social norms, with, I think, kind of an acceptance that gender is more complicated than just a binary construct. And, you know, there's some jurisdictions in the United States that have something like 30 different gender choices on their demographic surveys. I think New York City is one of those places. Again, we have not adopted that approach, but there's emerging understanding, if you will, of this space, and we wanted to take a position because of our own value of inclusion, of giving people the opportunity to play using the gender that they identify as. We talked about that. And then we launched this policy only after consultation with legal counsel and in consultation with other sports organizations and other NGOs, both serving the LGBTQ community and more general organizations that had memberships, much like U.S. Chess. And to a large extent, we codified what was already happening. So when I fill out an application for membership within U.S. Chess, I flag that I'm female. Self-reporting. We were codifying that self-reporting practice. So this is the policy. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to deconstruct it in the next set of slides. So number one, we let people identify as they choose. No questions asked. We also allow people to change the gender flag on their membership profile without any questions asked. If someone identified male 3 years ago when they signed up, but today are now identifying female, they can call our office and request that change, and we make that change, period. Now, being that this is the chess community, everybody thinks everybody's trying to game the system or game someone else. So this next principle within the policy basically requires that if somebody is requesting a subsequent change, that we require some documentation that that change is reflected in some kind of official documents. And we do request, although I think this would be hard to enforce, we request that these record change requests happen 2 weeks prior to participating in an event. You know, we want to be sensitive to an individual's needs, And we understand that these are personal situations. Doing it with the office is probably just easier and more discreet than doing it at an event at an open registration table. And then, of course, we acknowledge that our policy is subservient to the prevailing law in the jurisdiction where this, where we would be having an event. So as we launched this, we knew we were going to get some questions, and much to our surprise, there was almost no fanfare and no backlash. We had a couple of snarky emails, but by and large, I think we were ready for this policy. And so we did the, like, why did we do this? What's the intent? You know, the how do you go about making that change to your record? What's the effect on women's sections or tournaments? And I'll speak to this. At the National Women's Open in Las Vegas, which happened June after this policy was initially adopted in May of 2018, the organizer sent me a note during the tournament that there had been a couple of players who were there, and they were transgender women, and there was another player who was about to raise a stink, and the organizer pulled out the policy and just laid it on the table and said, "This is U.S. chess policy. All women are welcome to play," and there were no issues. So, taking the step to clarify what our standing is and making it known that this applies to all U.S. chess rated events has kind of removed any sense of, you know, we can challenge something we may not understand or accept ourselves, but this is the policy for U.S. chess rated events. And I hear almost nothing about this now, so it seems to be working. And again, we wanted to ensure that people understood that this was squarely within the mission that our board has set for the organization. Okay. The final policy I want to talk about, and the most recently adopted one, is our Safe Play Guidelines. And this is a set of best practices that we adopted, modeled loosely, or actually largely after what U.S. tennis has done. There is an organization that's congressionally chartered that supports the Olympic sports in the United States. It's called the U.S. Center for Safe Sport. And they've been around 2 or 3 years, and basically this is what they do. They require all Olympic sporting organizations to have a set of policies governing the protection of athletes and coaches from inappropriate behavior. And so we too, given that our own community has had some allegations of misconduct, felt the need to, again, educate our community on how important it is to engage in certain behavioral norms when you're dealing particularly with children, but also protecting the adults who work with children. And so everybody at a national event, U.S. Chess National event, that is working an event or participating in an event, including spectators, so the parents are subject to these policies. And the policies themselves address sexual misconduct, bullying, hazing, harassment, emotional misconduct, and physical misconduct. And all those definitions are outlined in the policy. And if you want to download the policy, there's a reference there online. And you think people would understand that you shouldn't be coaching a kid by yourself in a hotel room, but it happens at every tournament. I'm just dumbfounded that that is a normal course of behavior. We think the rule of 3 is a much better practice for people to follow. And so we've really made that the cornerstone of, you know, the good practices that should be used when working with children. People shouldn't be following kids into the bathroom. We certainly would like to prohibit things like cell phones and taking pictures under the stall, because people either suspect cheating or perhaps something more insidious. We're staging now at our national scholastic events a bathroom monitor, a tournament director who's sitting outside the bathroom to make sure that kids are safe when they go into the bathroom. I mean, there's bad stuff happens, and we just don't want it happening on our watch if we can at all prevent it. As mentioned earlier, the background check is a requirement for anybody who works at our events. And then we haven't yet identified a training protocol for this set of policies for the Safe Play Guidelines. And if there are other federations that are interested in working on something together that could train chess people, we would be very interested in that conversation. But that is a requirement of the policy that is going to be phased in at a later date. The guidelines provide for how you report an incident, and you report it differently on site. The priority from our perspective is to protect the person who is victimized, and an assessment will be made whether, if this sounds like a legal case, well, do you call law enforcement, or is it something that can be handled administratively internally within the Federation through our ethics process or something else? And then after the event, someone can report a case of abuse through a hotline, a phone hotline that myself and our Director of Events monitor, or an email box, abuse@uschess.org. Same thing, myself and our Director of Events. The policy addresses false accusations and retaliation. Those would both be subject to the ethics process within US Chess, and sanctions could be including revocation of membership, permanent revocation, if people are using this policy inappropriately. So on the whole, our reactions to the policies have been overwhelmingly positive. I think we lost a couple members over one of the policy, but out of 100,000 people, okay, we're doing what we believe is the right thing. I mentioned earlier the National Open and being thanked for just providing a clear space, a clear understanding of what the expected activity, norms of behavior are at US Chess events. And frankly, we're learning as we go to what's a very rapid change in both the legal landscape and in the social norms within the country. And we continue to keep an eye toward how we can make the policy more workable and refined within our applications of it. And I just want to leave you with a shout out we got from a very prominent transgender activist. Her name's Charlotte Clymer. She also happens to be an active chess player. And she works for the Human Rights Campaign in Washington. And when we initially released the policy, she caught wind of it and gave us a shout out. And then there were some news things that were happening, not related to US Chess, but Charlotte, again, later, some months later, reminded people at how we as an organization were sort of taking this middle ground position that seemed to be working really well. And we always appreciate getting positive feedback from a community we're working with to tell us that something we've done is working well. So if you aren't familiar, Charlotte did a recent podcast with Jen Shahadi, and it's available to listen to at any point. So next steps, we're going to continue to monitor what we've put together and make adjustments. And next up is we have a committee working on accessibility guidelines for people with all kinds of disabilities. And those will be, I'm sure, on our website in the spring. That's the goal. And our goal is to broaden the community of players, regardless of their station in life, and providing them a place at US Chess to be part of our community. So thank you.
I have a brief one. The safe play guidelines and the other changes, in how far are they already incorporated in the trainings of arbiters, organizers, and what is the third group? Coaches, trainers,
Right.
in the US?
So the training program is not yet set. The guidelines were released, I think, in August, and we have not identified a training program sort of off the shelf that we felt met our needs. And so, again, if there are federations that want to work on something together to do something for the chess community, I think that would be a very powerful, a powerful way to show how we're all kind of addressing these things together. But we're continuing to look for a baseline that we can then adopt or adapt to meet our needs.
Just following on this, so in Germany there is a big movement at the moment because we're considered a sport, and actually the Sports Federation is pushing quite a lot for this to be implemented. And this is actually tied to all the money, so Sports Federation want to have money, which is usually what works. So currently there's really good training programs in Germany.
Very good.
Not from the Chess Federation, but mainly coming from the Sports Federation, which we're implementing, which I'm happy to talk about.
Thank you. Yeah, the U.S. Center for Safe Sport actually has a very nice training program. But it's, for us, we're not able to join because we're not an Olympic activity. We're not an Olympic designated sport. So for us to do it would be $40, I think, or $50 per person to be trained. And when we're talking about thousands of people, it's just not economically feasible for us to use their model. That's, yes.
Any more questions?
Thank you. Yeah, I was really delighted to hear about your inclusive transgender policy. I was wondering whether you've developed any ways to help non-binary people to feel included and to kind of navigate the processes.
Right. So for somebody who's non-binary, if that's how they identify, they would be welcome at any open event. You know, we don't have male events. We have open events and we have female events. And so if someone's non-binary, there's a place in the open event for such individual. You know, that's what we have. And again, people are welcome to play chess. Just, you know, you register for an event and you come and take your seat. We just recently published it's a fundraising tool, but really trying to express our values in using programmatic themes that we're developing or have, you know, full-on operational. And one of the things to highlight our point of inclusion is there's an expression in English that everyone has a seat at the table. There's a seat and we've inserted the word chess, so everyone is welcome at the chess table. And that's, you know, that's something we as an organization will continue to promote through everything that we do. And again, I've been just delighted that we've had really no pushback. Our nation is ready. That's.
Yep. This is just a comment. What Carol was talking about. I think part of this gender started when we were looking at getting into. Well, I mean, it had always been thought about, but when we implemented the girls' club room, that was an area where we were pushing women and girls chess, and throughout the United States, that really started coming up and bubbling up. And we had an incident where we were at the National Junior High, and there was a young lady who was a boy that was a girl, and wanted to come into the club room. And I told the mother, I said, well, as well as some of the officials, that they said, look, if they're a human being, they should be allowed to play chess. And if she is, you know, and we brought her in, and there was no incident whatsoever. In fact, she was very happy. In fact, afterwards, the mother thanked us for allowing her daughter to come into the girls' club.
Yeah, our trans policy was triggered by just 2 or 3 inquiries we got from players who would be affected by the policy, and one was a youth player, 2 were adults, and even before the policy was implemented, we just allowed people to make the change. And so, you know, just putting a stake in the ground that this is the right thing to do, and, you know.
Well, you will have yet to bring these ideas about inclusion to the FIDE table, because inclusion is spelled quite differently
I'll
there.
let somebody else do that.
Yeah, we have a FIDE roundtable this afternoon, and we have a question from Sarah, who will be in that roundtable, unrelated to that probably now.
Yeah, I just was thinking that it's probably just a bit easier to deal with this, the transgender issues in chess than in physical sports. Would you agree with that? Because
I would
it's
agree.
not the physical aspect.
Yeah, so one of the things we consulted was like the National Collegiate Athletic Association's policies for transgender, as well as one other sporting organization. And because, you know, we're not talking about physical activity where, you know, performance-enhancing drugs, things like testosterone, are not a factor. It made it much easier for us to move in this direction than it perhaps was for physical sport. Although they're ahead of us. I mean, there are trans athletes who are competing at the highest levels of the games today, and that's, you know, we're playing catch up. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Carol.